Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Courtney Wilson, and I am a member of the Head of the Charles Gold Cup Grant Review Committee. We're here today to celebrate the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and we thank you all for spending some time with us tonight. So what we're going to do is we're going to hear from these fabulous people who are on screen with me. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the Head of the Charles and the Gold Cup has been up to, and then I'm going to turn it right over to my esteemed panelists. So this summer, Head of the Charles partnered with the Gold Cup to create a grant fund to support rowing programs that serve under-resourced communities across the country. And over the summer, this fall, we awarded grants totaling $100,000 to our inaugural class of 7 recipients, all of which are actively promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion through access to our sport. We're looking forward to growing the fund in the next several years, and we're working hard to make sure that happens. We'll talk about that another time. But you know, the Grant Review Committee didn't just want to contribute cash. We wanted to really work together with our inaugural class of recipients, because the work that they are doing and that we all are doing is too important. So one of the things that we wanted to do was help to contribute to a community where we could learn from each other, where these programs could work together. They could learn and support each other and trade ideas and just grow DEI work in rowing. So tonight we're here to do that. We're hoping that this goes well, this webinar. And if it does go well, then you'll see more of these things from us. Given that it is Martin Luther King Day, one thing that we wanted to do was sort of honor his legacy and his work and his contributions to our country. And we talked about what we wanted to do and who we wanted to have on this panel today. And we came up with the idea of looking at some of Dr. King's speeches. And in particular, one speech stood out to us in 1967, which makes it slightly older than me. Dr. King gave a speech at Stanford entitled "The Other America." This is a speech that you can access online. I really encourage you to Google it. As powerful as his speeches are, they're amazing to read because you really get a sense of the poetry in his writing and the eloquence in his writing. This particular speech was about how there are 2 Americas, and it focused on the economic and social disparities which were causing a growing poverty gap between white Americans and Black Americans. And this gap was the root of, he believed it to be the root of inequality. I just want to read a couple of lines from the speech, and then we're going to get into our panel. He spoke, "One America is beautiful for situation, and in a sense, this America is overflowing with the milk of prosperity and the honey of opportunity. This America is the habitat of millions of people who have food and material necessities for their bodies, and culture and education for their minds, and freedom and human dignity for their spirits. The other America has a daily ugliness about it that constantly transforms the ebulliency of hope into the fatigue of despair. They find themselves perishing on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of the vast ocean of material prosperity." Again, this speech is over 50 years old, but I think that the events of the past few weeks have really reinforced that for people like us, for people of color, for Black and brown people, there are 2 Americas. There are definitely 2 Americas. There's the America where you can carry a Confederate flag into the Capitol and you will be photographed and celebrated. And then there's the America that people like us face. Today, we want to talk about what it's like to be Black and brown and a person of color in rowing, in rowing America. So I've got with me 5 very esteemed, very just great panelists. I want to introduce them to you, and then we're going to talk about what it's like in our rowing America. So if we could all introduce ourselves, let's start off with my fellow HOCR GC Grant Review Committee member, Randell. Tell us who you are, what you know, how you came into rowing. Tell us all of that.
Yeah, so my name is Randell Daniels. I was a part of PCR nearly a decade ago, Philadelphia City Rowing. I was a part of their inaugural program. So in 2010, 2011, those were the primary years in which I was involved in rowing. Had a pretty great experience. It's definitely not a program I thought I'd really ever be a part of because I never really thought I'd be in an eight at all or four or pretty much any other boat, to be perfectly honest. But I joined PCR nearly a decade ago, and I've learned that rowing was something that sort of contributed to my life in a more positive way than not. And this is sort of my way of giving back and contributing to the sport what it has to me. Again, I'm Randell. You're muted, Courtney.
Yeah, it's my first time on Zoom. We have representatives from 3 of our grant recipients here today, so I'd like them to introduce themselves. Let's start with Patrick.
Hi, everyone. I'm Patrick Johnson, and I'm the director for Athletes Without Limits Rowing. And we are a co-program with DC Strokes Rowing Club Community Programs. DC Strokes is the largest and one of the only full standing gay and lesbian predominantly rowing club in the world. And an important part of DC Strokes is community programs, which includes veteran programs, intellectual disabled programs, and our inner city program, which is our Serve Your City Youth rowing program that has been around for 8 years now. And we partner with Serve Your City DC, which is a nonprofit that right now is there under the bridges, helping our brothers and sisters who live in tents, taking them food, getting them out from under there. So our main focus are our kids and families in Anacostia. And that is really the main focus of our rowing program. Those kids there, as well as the kids who live in the homeless shelter, and bringing them down and letting the boathouse be a place where they have a home. So I'm happy to be here and on behalf of Athletes Without Limits, and definitely grateful for the opportunity.
Thank you, Patrick, for being here. Brannon, tell us about yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brannon Johnson. I am the owner-operator of BLJ Community Rowing. We are the only Black-owned and operated rowing organization in the country. We just found that out a couple years ago. Now we've got Ashley Pryor, which I'm excited about. And yeah, I'm in Philadelphia and really excited to be a part of the conversation and see what kind of change we can kind of create and keep moving forward.
Thanks, Brannon. Craig, introduce yourself to us, please.
Evening, everyone. My name is Craig White. I'm from Newark, New Jersey. I coach and run a program in Newark called St. Benedict's Prep. I learned how to row in college at William and Mary Rowing Club. And then I came home and started a program here. And I'm happy to see everybody and partake in the conversation, obviously.
Thank you, Craig. And Aquil, you have been showing up in my Facebook feed nonstop. I really want to buy a hydro at this point. It's worked. So please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
It's the algorithms. They know you want one. My name is Aquil Abdullah, 2004 Olympian in the double sculls, Henley Diamond Sculls winner, silver medalist at the Pan American Games, first African-American male to represent the United States in the sport of rowing. It is a pleasure to be here with everyone that is doing such great work, far more than I am. But it is really amazing to have been in the sport at a time where I was the only, and to see, at least at the elite level, and to see so many other faces there now and hearing so many voices from so many people.
Thank you, Aquil. Let's start off with you. Tell us about the moment that you realized that you were living in a different athletic experience than other American rowers. What brought you to that realization?
Yeah, so it's funny because I had to think about this. And I was talking to my wife, who is white, and she's like, "What are you guys going to be talking about?" She's like, like other. And I was like, "Well, I rowed. I was a rower." And she's like, "Well, what about when you played football? Was there a part of yourself that you did not bring to rowing?" And it really highlighted a point where I was at the movie theaters with some of my friends, with my teammates from rowing at George Washington University. It's one of the first times we went out, and I saw some of my friends from high school, Black friends, and it was that first moment where I had this real schism shock, where there was like, whoa, like there's definitely a part of me that I am no longer experiencing or feeding as a result of where I am. And and I had to figure out how I tapped into that. I was very fortunate in that I had a coach who sort of addressed it head on, in John Devlin. And he said, you got to put it's like, there's going to be a lot that's put on your plate because you are the only, So like part of my sort of story, or my recognition of being othered, was that the mantle that was put on me by being the only, so that's part of it. But the other part of it was that I had to find what I needed to feed my entire person at the multicultural student services at GW, because I needed that diversity. I needed to be around people like me that had a similar cultural experience. And so that for me was part of my other as an athlete.
Thank you. Brannon, same question to you. You have, the added issue of being a woman in a sport that has long been a white male sport. Tell us about when you realized you were in another America.
This was an interesting question for me, I think, because I grew up in the sport. So, I rode all the way through high school. I went to Texas. I trained for national team. And I think I had the pleasure and I guess the good fortune of being in a very, very strong family and a very Black family. And I got to come home and sort of, de-stress, kind of dissect all of the incidents and things that I had. But I think I realized I was in other from day one. I mean, you walk into a boathouse and you stand out and it's noticeable. And then it's only a couple of days before you have your first incident. It's only a couple of days before people start saying things. And so I think really from day one, but I think what really resonated with me was probably traveling, whenever we travel with a team and my teammates started having a joke because I would always get stopped by security and I'm always getting checked, especially international travel and domestic travel. And it was after the 17th, 20th time, it became a joke, and it really wasn't funny. And it wasn't dealt with either, but it wasn't addressed. I think as far as switching from coach to athlete, from athlete to coach, it's more of, when people walk into our space, I'm never perceived as the person to be in charge. I'm never the sort of person they're looking for. They're always looking for my boss or looking for whoever I report to, and they're usually disappointed whenever it's me. So yeah, I think it's a daily sort of thing that we navigate all the time. And, I think you have to acknowledge it. Everyone's got their defense mechanisms or the things that we put in place to help us get through the day and, go back to fight, the following day and that week and that month and that year.
What mechanisms do you use? How did you feel when your teammates considered it a joke that you were stopped? Because that's not a joke and it's not fun. So how did you navigate that?
I mean, I think, again, it's honesty. It's also, I have excellent parents. I remember we landed in London and I called my dad And, it was more of, okay, Brendan, they don't have to deal with it. You have to deal with it because you need to be able to perform and you need to progress. They don't have to do it. The privilege allows them to not have to deal with this. And so are we going to stay here stuck, or are we going to do what we need to do so that we can do the job at hand? And, my dad is an entrepreneur and he's always about the bottom line of what can we do to get you to keep you on target so that we can go out and do what we're here to do and take care of business. And I think that, now that I am coaching, I absolutely handle it a little bit differently. I think I handle coaching incidents very differently. But when we're switching from athlete to coach, I have more power as a coach. As an athlete, I am a member of a team, and I have to sort of hold my seat down and try to. Being a Black woman specifically, we're always on the defensive. I'm always easing through white spaces. I'm always trying not to take up too much space. I'm always trying to, I'm tall. I stand up very slowly. I try to, you know what I mean? You're always on the defensive. So whenever you have to do that all the time, it really becomes a way of being, and I think switching to a coach I had to learn to sort of understand I do things differently and respect my coaching style and respect my leadership style and understand that difference doesn't make me wrong. And we are going to do things differently because I did grow up in the sport. So I know firsthand some things that I would like to address and things I'd like to see happen differently.
Yeah. I just wanted to say one thing about travel, just to sort of, and this is later on in my other history, but try going to represent your country with the name Aquil Abdullah after 2011, being stopped, having to be verified by the FBI, missing your flight to a competition. Like, to me, that is something that none of my teammates ever had to experience. And that right there is
You had to go after me, Aquil? Seriously? You just had to take all the wind out of my sails? Thanks.
You reminded me.
Don't talk over at Johnson. We're the Johnsons.
Craig, same question to you, and you have gone from athlete to coach as well. So tell us about your experience and when you knew that you were other.
I'm not gonna lie, Courtney, when I read that question, I laughed the first time, only because, and everybody here knows, the first time we learned that is you're like 10, sometime between like 9 and 14, so I mean, like if you're talking about being other, the first time I got called the N-word, I was crossing Silver Strand, whatever road it is in San Diego that like separates the little peninsula from the ocean. And some red car drove by and 5 or 6 kids shouted out the window, "Yeah." And then I was just like looking around at my mom, my aunts being like, "The hell was that about?" And then you get the talk and blah, 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 blah. So I think, I knew what I was getting myself into before I started, if that makes any sense, because, the uncomfortable fact that I don't think we talk enough about is that the tensions, the racial tensions that we deal with on a daily basis are taught, So like I went to a Catholic school, a Catholic middle school for a time. We weren't, dropping N-bombs and expletives at each other in middle school, in like 2nd grade, that wasn't happening. So somewhere along the way in our development, people are taught to hate, somebody has to sit their child down, or your kid sit in the living room and they hear a parent say it, they hear a coach say it, they hear a referee, might hear a referee say it, or somebody in a position of power say it, and then it becomes normalized, It's like, well, it's okay for me to do that too, or I should behave that way, or I should treat these people that way because it's taught. So, I mean, I'm being a teacher right now, so I apologize.
That's fine.
But that's where it comes from, You know, kids absorb the behavior that we give them. You know, whatever we normalize, whatever we tolerate, it becomes a part of who they are as individuals. I mean, so for me in the sport, thank God for my mom, right? You know, thank God for my mom, because she always made sure that I was moving, you know, that I was always doing something. I was always out in the world. And thankfully for me, because of her, I saw too much of the world before I got to get involved with rowing. And by that point, you know, I was learned enough to understand, well, okay, I'm hearing these things just because these people are hateful and ignorant. Not because, you know, all white people are bad or all Black people are this. It's just like, that's a problem with their family and their parents and, you know, whatever. So let me move on. So for me, I just do whatever I can to give those lessons to the kids that I work with, and to the parents that I work with as well, because a lot of them, you know, are, you know, they second guess allowing their child to be put into a sport like ours. And I get it. Like, I get it. Sometimes I'm not just selling the kid on the sport, I'm selling the whole family on the sport. On, you know, yes, this is a safe place, you know, and I might be lying, but I'm like, at least they'll be safe with me. You know, and then we move on.
Patrick, same question to you.
Well, first I want to say, for any of you out there who are listening, we've been doing a lot of talks like this over the last 8 to 9 months. I know Craig, Brannon, myself, and Aquil, we're have been on the Black Coaches and Rowers Association, which is kind of, in a way, for me, a support group. It's, you know, like, we're talking about this stuff, we're helping each other, but in a place where we can feel comfortable. And I'm saying that to say how the thing I've seen the most in the last 9 months is this assumption for people that we're so comfortable talking about this, like, oh, here they go again, talking about being Black. It is, I don't know if you can hear it in the voices of the peers on this panel, but it is not easy to put this stuff out there. It is not easy to be this vulnerable, and it's not easy. And so I just want to say that, because I definitely have had this feeling, like, some people think it's like, oh, it's so easy for us to do this. You know, goes back to the, you know, oh, here they go again, talking about race. So I just wanted to kind of start with that. When I'm a 52-year-old Black man. I'm also a 20-year-old disabled military veteran and also a gay rower. And I say that in that when I was trying to answer this question, it was really hard just to keep it in one little thing, because I'm like, oh my God, go back to Huntsville, Texas, you know, 1986, the year I graduated from high school. I got 20 stories just from that year alone. And my focus, my degree in college was clarinet performance. I was a classical clarinetist. So I can, you know, go there also and go, oh, all this stuff about being that Black guy in that orchestra where this doesn't happen, this happened. My 20 years in the US Navy band, I want to share one little story from there, but then go very rowing specific, because I think I want to stay on point here. In one of the times when I knew that I was living in a different experience was my first tour with the US Navy band, where basically the band goes, we're in 2 tour buses, we're somewhere in the US, we were in Utah. I'm just saying it was, because it wasn't fun. There were only 3 Black people in the entire concert band, which one of them, the female, had to wear a wig because her braids, you know, were not appropriate according to the white leadership of the band, even though they were in total regulations with Navy regs. But so she had to wear a wig on that tour because we were going to Utah. We didn't want to make the white people in Utah feel uncomfortable. The difference, you know, Aquil sharing about like walking to the airport, a thing that we've all felt and we all experienced that some of our peers don't understand. When you're walking through there, you're not just that rower. You're not, oh, there's Team USA. It's like, there's that Black guy. That's that Black rower. And I, had an instance where I was on receiving, where I was at the concert shaking hands with people. And this little old white man wouldn't shake my hand. He like literally pulled his hand back and went to the next person in the line. The way that was dealt with was I was taken off of receiving for the rest of the tour. And it showed me a lot about the people who were in leadership. And it taught me a lot about things that I thought weren't really out there. I thought, oh, this is only in Texas. And I was like, damn it, this is in DC too. This is at, this level, which we all can see from our country right now. Obviously, it's a lot more prevalent. My other example that I want to share was at World Rowing Championships in 2013. First, I'll say, I had athletes in 3 boats out of the 5 pair of boats there, but, and I was walking around, and if you guys don't know who Angel Rodriguez is from Cuba, he is the amazing, Cuban sculler. And I was kind of spying on, like watching him, like, oh, kind of gazing on him. And then he started walking up towards me, and I was like, oh my God, what's happening? And he just stopped and said, "You're the Black coach from USA, aren't you?" And I was like, oh, yeah, you're Angel Rodriguez. And he said, "I just want to say, keep your head up, because you must be damn good, because I've heard them call you the Black coach behind your back." And it helped me to know why some of the microaggressions that I was feeling on that trip, why I didn't want to go to the coach's dinner, didn't want to do that. But one of the things that I'll talk about later about my grandmother is like, I heard Willie Dean Johnson said in my head, just like Brannon's, parents said, "No, you keep going." I heard her in my head saying, "You don't let them make you leave." And so a lot of times it's really unfortunate that we have to continue getting up and keep showing up and not be pushed out. And so, and I think that transcends rowing, but I think one of the biggest things that I've learned is we have to talk about that in this rowing community and stop acting like it's all, everybody's nice. No, there's a good, at least half of this community that isn't, but people need to say it's not okay to do what you do. And those are the changes that I want to be a part of seeing, even if it means some of the things that have happened over the 9 months, which is a lot of people who won't sign up for a race if I'm co-hosting it, won't row at that regatta. So I see you. Keep doing it, because we're still going to keep showing up.
Thank you, Patrick. We're going to come back to what we can do as a community to keep all of us showing up and to address the microaggressions and quite honestly, the macroaggressions that we're all facing. But Randell, tell us about your moment when you realized you were in the other rowing America.
Yeah, so I think like many people on this panel, I realized that I was, in the other rowing America quite literally early on, but not quite from the perspective that everyone else came to the realization. So at PCR, it was a very diverse program. And one thing I noticed was the disproportionate amount of Black athletes we had in comparison to other programs. So I'd be going on the runs on Kelly Drives with my team and we'd be the only crew running in a pack with Black athletes, with Asian athletes, right? And I noticed that other teams didn't quite have the same thing. And my mind was always curious as to why they didn't have those things, right? I would also look to my left and look to my right on race day and sort of wonder why, when we're lining up, there are no other athletes who look like me in other boats. And so when I came to that realization, it wasn't because, I faced anything like what Aquil or Patrick or Brannon or Craig faced, right? Because I was a part of a diverse team where I was accepted. And it was the mere fact that my program was founded in the first place that let me know that people needed to reach out to an other side of America in order to source talent from that other side, because it was completely void in the sport of rowing. And that was sort of my realization. I think one cultural thing I could note in terms of the other side of America, what I experienced is that in an urban community like where I grew up at, I've been in Section 8 housing pretty much my whole life. I grew up in a very low socioeconomic strata, and rowing is not generally a sport that's accepted in the sort of community I come from. And so people have to learn to understand why it's a sport that should be appreciated, but more likely than not, if you are a Black rower, you might face some criticism in urban areas because people don't necessarily see that as a sport that is as valuable as basketball or football. So that was largely the extent of my experience on the other side.
Thank you. I want to hear from all of you. who or what has been most influential in your rowing or coaching career? And how has that influence contributed to your retention as an athlete or a coach? I mean, we've heard, it seems the moms are getting a lot of credit. And as somebody's mom, I really appreciate that. But let's talk more about that. Aquil, let's start with you.
And not just because she's on this call, but my mom. No, I have to, I mean, there's so many. I am a great believer that you don't get anywhere by yourself. And so it's really hard that was a hard one for me. There's no doubt though that Anita de France was like so important in me maintaining the course and being a gentle hand behind the scenes, sort of just encouraging me, whether it was a note after a world championship or whether it was sending me this boat, this skull after I lost, you know, a race, a big race. She was always there, not just as someone to emulate, but as someone to you know, that I could be the real me, you know. And she may not even know the impact that she had on me or in my rowing career. And I think that is a testament to me, to sort of just how, you know, how important she was and how important she is for rowers today, for Black rowers today, to know who she is, to know her story. And so that's, I would have to say Anita de France. And, you know, oddly enough, Mike Tatey as well was important. You know, he always, when I was rowing, he would always tell me, he's like, Aquil, you got to put all that other stuff out of your head. People are going to say what they want to say, and people are going to write what they want to write. But the most important thing for you to focus on is getting better as an athlete and accomplishing your goals. And, you know, he didn't have to say that to me. He's got a whole stable of guys that are trying to make the national team, you know? And so to me, that was really important. So those two people were really important to me.
Thank you. Brannon, how about you? You talked a little bit about your parents already. Who else in your life?
Yeah, I'm gonna definitely say, wow, I would say, so my high school coach, I was the rowing team. I raced a single. I think my high school coach did a great job of not ignoring my Blackness. I mean, when the incident started, she didn't shy away from it. So we had to have the difficult conversations and we dealt with it. And I think she prepared me for college. I think my college coach prepared me because she showed me how brutal and how isolating the sport can be. And I had some, you know, really tough lessons. And then I think my dad really helped me navigate all of it, you know, and I think that sort of trifecta is really kind of what helped me and guided me through. And as a coach and now a business owner, and as I navigate this thing, and I would say colleagues are absolutely helpful. David Banks is a very, very good friend, and I yell at him a lot. So I definitely do. You know, Craig and Ash are such new friends, and, you know, so colleagues now, I would say those are the thing that kind of, sorry, Aquil as well. You know, sort of anchors and more inspires. You know, I've been doing this for a long time, and inspiration is important because fatigue is a real thing. And, you know, I think it's important that if we're being transparent and if we're being honest, you know, you need to recharge, and you need to talk to someone who cannot sympathize, but can empathize. But when we start talking and getting into empathy, you know, these are things that rejuvenate and help us sort of really, you know, resonate with our answers and understanding and how we can move forward and taking care of each other. So I would say that would be my answer.
Let me ask you this. When I So I came to rowing later in life. I played rugby in college because I didn't think I could row. And like a lot of sort of later in life rowers, I embraced it wholeheartedly. And I bought all the books. I read all the books. I tried to watch all the bad movies. And, nobody looks like me. But I was used to that because I grew up in a white suburb and I used to work, I was a corporate lawyer. So I worked with investment bankers and nobody looked like me. So I didn't realize what I was missing by not having people like you in sort of my world. Like I just didn't know. Like, so what would you say to the coaches out there who might not realize that they're Black athletes, they need a little bit extra? How do we get them to be the support that we need?
Wow. Okay, that question just gave me goosebumps. Wow. It's interesting. I don't think we realize just the visuals, how important the visuals are. I think it's so funny because someone reached out to us because she was having a hard time on her team. And she texted David and I, and we were trying to coach her and navigate, this whole white space. And she's a Black girl, and with the current sort of cultural climate. And the fact that, and I hate social media, but my assistant coach, Shamir, handles our social media. So she reached out and, I think that David and I were talking and we didn't have that, we didn't have that. So there is some sort of progress, but I think to the coaches of these teams to take the time to acknowledge, my high school coach really, even though she didn't have the answers, even though she didn't always know what to say and even messed up sometimes, she was willing to have the conversation and willing to acknowledge. That's a space where we can start, and now that we're in this sort of everyone, diversity is trending and it's a great word. I am wanting to work with organizations that are willing to do what's required, right? Your best isn't good enough. You have to do what's required. And no one knows that better than rowers, right? Like when I'm trying to break 701 isn't good enough. 7 isn't good enough. I need to break 7. So I need a 659 or a 658, right? If I tried my hardest and I still got a 701, I didn't do what was required to PR. So I think these organizations, you need these coaches, these teams, you need to be willing to do what is required to see the diversity and to protect that space and see changes and create changes and make sustainable change. And I think that's really, and visuals are really, really important.
Thank you. So let's go back. Craig, tell us about who was influential in your career. Mom, of course, but besides mom.
Yeah, I mean the kids, it's just, I was ruined from an early age with not respecting, the boundaries that are set forth in our like unspoken like racial climate. Like, oh, you brown person, you can't do this and you can't do that. Like the women in my house raised me to aggressively ignore those things and go wherever I wanted to go. So I kind of had some of that armor on me before I even got to college. But the kids, flat out and their families, because, and I think that's where how the sport saves itself. I think that's where rowing saves itself because there's literally nothing like it. And, once you fall in love with something, you're going to find a way to do it, regardless of what people say or what people do or what obstacles get put in your way. You're going to figure it out. And that simple lesson, when you give that to, when a teenager figures that out on their own, like it's my favorite thing in the world. Like if I could, like that transformation could be like, coalesced into like a snack or a drug, I would take it every day. Because it's the best. It's literally the best high in the world. Watching a kid who's 13 years old, who's lost, or who's super smart, but, you know, just doesn't have the confidence or needs something. And then they use the sport to find a better version of themselves. Like, come on now. Like, who doesn't want to watch that happen every day, you know? And the kids, you know, and what really, really keeps me going is their humility and their passion, right? Because they don't have everything they need. And, you know, they'll go to regattas or, you know, be sitting at the start line, and then someone will say something slick to them, or they'll overhear something, and they don't care, you know? I mean, they care, but they keep showing up is the point I'm trying to make, you know? And they keep showing up and they keep grinding and they continue to work on themselves. And it's truly humbling to be able to be a part of that, you know, and to watch them grow, to watch we've had families grow, like parents who have come to be a part of the program, and from their interactions with other parents, like it's transformed the entire family, you know. And just to watch that kind of stuff is like, it's an insane privilege, to be a part of it, to you know, the fact that they trust what the coaching staff, what we ask them to do, and that they show up despite the fact that their situation and their circumstances are beyond not ideal. And I mean, you know, I can do that forever. You know, it's great. It's great.
How do you, you know, we all love the sport. We know that love. That's what gets us up very early in the morning. That's what got my overweight butt back on the erg tonight before this. And it was painful and it was ugly, but I did it. But how do you,
beautiful, don't even try.
how do you convince the kid who looks out and sees no one like them and is worried about being an outsider, worrying about not being good, worrying about being teased or mocked, or, you know, that's not a sport for our people. How do you get that kid to show up?
I'm not entirely sure, because our kids have a very similar experience as like Randell, you know, like they live in a city that is representative of them. You know, they practice in a space which is representative of them. You know, they can walk in and start speaking Spanish and start speaking Portuguese and, you know, or speak Spanglish and whatever. And people are laughing and making jokes. They can listen to whatever music they want to listen to. And people don't, you know, turn a weird eye or be like, why is that in here? You know, they can they can warm up in their do-rag and no one's saying anything like what the hell is that? You know, like there's a whole bunch of things that they don't, you know, our kids don't have to deal with. And I'm grateful that they don't have to deal with it. But if, you know, only way I can speak to that is to think about what I experienced in college. And like I had like one of my pair partners in the double, he grew up in Ohio. I won't say his name because he'll curse me out later. He grew up in Ohio. I won't say we're in Ohio. And he had literally never seen a Black person before in the flesh until he came to William and Mary. So like it was just MTV and like whatever was on the news. That was like all he knew about Blackness came from a television screen. And he was in my freshman hall and we rode together. And like just the like the battles. I mean, we're really close friends now. Like, you know, I was at his wedding this past 2 summers ago. But it was a learning experience. But here's the difference, right? He was willing to learn, right? And more importantly, I was willing to correct him. And I feel like that's a big part of it too, because we can't ignore when that stuff happens to us. And when you know, when you come out and you stand your ground, you have 2 options, right? You can be like, all right, I was wrong, and you can try to learn, or you can be like, F you, and then it's just, and then the fireworks go off, you know. But he's a good man, you know, and he came from a good family, and he was like, all right, you know, maybe I shouldn't have said that, you know, and then, you know, we can, like, you know, get over it, and then he can get, you know, I steered, so, you know, I could just smack him upside his head because he's sitting right in front of me in the fall. So it's like, you know, but we, you know, we were able to grow together because he was willing to listen and because I was willing to speak up.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah, I mean, you can jump in, Aquil. I don't know how to say it like correctly, but all at the same time, not every kid can speak up, because I can incredibly imagine a situation where if a kid did try to stand their ground, they'd get kicked off the team, or if they didn't have the support of a coach. All my coaches would have supported me in that situation, all of them. And I had 3 coaches in the 4 years that I was in college. And I know every single last one of them would have been behind me had I experienced a difficult racial situation. But that's, you know, it's not a simple answer. The responsibility lies in lots of different places.
Courtney, I just wanted to jump in with something that I've heard Arshay say from A Most Beautiful Thing, and that is that how do we get kids to stay when they're othered, when there's no one around that looks like them? And the way that I like to think about it now is that if they have one dream, if they have one thing that's important to them, can we draw a connection from rowing to that thing so that they can accomplish that thing? You know, and then seeing that, oh, rowing helped me to accomplish this thing, or whether it's a relationship, whether it's some other type of thing that they needed, pointing them in the right direction, and then helping them to grow so that they can see that this is something that I love, and there are tangible things that I can do to actually accomplish the things that I want to accomplish and move on to the next thing, to the bigger thing. And so I think that that's important part of it.
I also would say too, Courtney, is, you know, growing up in the sport year, my mom would always say I was a raisin in a sea of rice. We're raisin in a sea of rice, right? And I think it's also important to understand that the change we want to see isn't happening right now. So that there is a responsibility, you know. I mentioned earlier, Ash Pryor, like we were the only Black row organization in the country and we didn't even know it. And now it's absolutely my job to hold this seat down until Ash is up and running. And then it's her job to hold that seat down and make sure she mentors the next organization that's coming around. And it's important for Craig to mentor the next Black coach that's out here. And I think that there is a synergy that starts to happen, but we have to encourage these kids and create a space for these kids to go to so that they can continue to advance the ball, because the objective is, if we give up or if we allow something to take us off of our path, then we're not advancing the ball and we're not getting it done either. So the reality is it's a lot nastier than we like to talk about, and it's not pleasant. And you do have to sort of prepare the youth, even the masters, you do have to prepare them to go to war, because they are going to have incidents and things are happening. And you're absolutely right. What do you say when your kid comes back in and an official has said something to them? You know, we do need to address it and be honest about what's happening. And Craig is absolutely right. If you can't always address it, you know, and we also need to be honest about that. So I do think, you know, we do need, to your point, is we do need to be talking to these kids and these masters and these people so that we can keep growing and advancing.
Thank you. That actually, we're going to take some questions at the end of the session. We're in probably about 10 more minutes, but one question that has come up in the chat is, and given that you've all talked about the influences of your coaches and your parents, what do you do if the difficult racial situation comes from a coach? What do you recommend for a young Black rower? Patrick, that goes to you.
Okay, tying that into, I think, important thing that we've seen these last 9 months is we as a community have to remember, it's like, just because you have one Black coach in your community doesn't mean that they're the same Black coach as that Black coach, or one Black rower or one Black family. Is breaking this stereotype by the white rowing community, just being kind of blunt, that, oh, well, let's ask him. And it's just like, so we have, and Brannon talked about this, we have a responsibility now that we know that we're all out there, to create a space where we're coming to each other, learning from each other, but also knowing that, like, that college rower who posted that, asking about that they know, here's who I can go to. But also, for me, my answer may be different. It may be different if I'm coaching this group or that group or in this city. So recognizing that the solution isn't always the same, but we have to be able to talk about that and even disagree and learn and grow from each other, so we can go, hey, the bottom line, kid, you can come here, and no matter how you say it or what you need to say, it's okay. Because we don't get that. We get, oh, here comes angry Black man. If it's a female coach, oh, she's a bitch, pardon my French. But why is it a white male coach in US rowing is strong and he's great? But if it's a woman, she's the B word. If it's a Black coach, oh, and just recognizing that those things do come into play, and we need to be comfortable talking about them. Like, it shouldn't be uncomfortable for us to say that, because that's the first step. Because then you're going, okay, we can come here and talk about that. When those kids who come into that boathouse for the first time, trust me, at our boathouse, when the kids are coming up from Anacostia, they're not coming from the same place as like our Gonzaga boys or our Wakefield kids or all that, but they're learning by the example we're teaching as the coaches. When the head coach of Gonzaga goes up to our 8 and goes down the line and knows every one of those little Black boys' name, they are like, wow. And that kind of stuff, it's not just us doing the work, it's everyone else going, we need to be a part of that work. It's not up to the Black community, it's not up to the women, it's not up to the gays, whatever. It's not up to those marginalized groups to make the changes. It's up to us to go, we need to make what's uncomfortable more comfortable. Because the thing that hurts me the most is when I feel like that kid couldn't say something because they didn't feel safe. And I'm saying kids because I really, I hear like what Craig is saying, and it's like, my God, like Craig is like me, like 20 years ago. I wish I knew him when I was, his age, because it inspires me to hear like that passion. Like when him and Brannon talk, it blows me away. And I know they're like, stop bragging, but I'm that old guy who's proud of seeing what our kids are doing, because they're the adults, and that gives me hope. But we really need to make it okay to talk about those uncomfortable things, but listen to them and not have the cookie cutter answer, because there's not a cookie cutter answer. There's many ways to deal with it. The bottom line is, can you say it and not be blacklisted? And I love that term, because, it's like, wow, so many of our terms are so, according to the darker's bad. So in the rowing community, what motivates me is, I listened to Brannon and Craig talking about their parents. Y'all know Willie Dean Johnson, that was my grandmother. Us talking about a history, talking about why we are strong, why we keep going. When she, said, I'm working at the house of the rich white family in my hometown, and they called me the N-word 3 times today, but I'm coming home and I'm telling you, son, you go to school and you practice that clarinet, because none of them can take any other way from you. You can go as far as you want. And having that kind of foundation that we have in our community, we really need to talk about that and share that more, because some of those kids may not have that. And we may be able to help them identify to that. And when they hear, wow, Coach Patrick shared and was vulnerable and shared about that, that's going to inspire them. When they see like Brannon, I know my little girls need to see her. They need to know, wow, did you know she raced at Texas? My little Texas girls need to know about that. And I want to brag about our people. And it doesn't need to be something where it's, uncomfortable. So our rowing community has a lot of growing to do, and just we need to make what's uncomfortable for these people and these people more comfortable by just talking about them. Because once we start talking about them, we're going to mess up. You're going to say things. Craig's college teammate, prime example. We learn and we grow. But I guarantee that man, from being that young man that him and Craig took that time, is a better citizen in our rowing community because of his experience. And he's going to pass that on. And we just need to keep doing that.
Yeah, I'm sorry to jump in on every question. They're so good. I think that I just wanted to say one thing about the question. And once again, not just because my mom asked it. When that child comes home and said that my coach said something like racially insensitive, we have to make sure that that child understands their value and be their advocate. Because you have a coach that comes home from some kid that's at some program that has loads of money, that parent will get in their car, drive down to the boathouse with their kid and say, you don't talk to my kid like that, So there's that imbalance of power, Richard Butler, like I said, we need to just tear the structure up. But in some ways we do. We have to make sure that that our kids understand their value and that we will stand up because we value them as well. So when someone comes and says something like that, we have to be there to back them up.
Thank you. Randell, give us some ideas. What are your thoughts on how we make this better, on how we address some of the issues that we've talked about tonight? That's a lot of pressure on you, Randell. Fix it.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like one thing we could do is just from sort of an economic or a financial standpoint is, sort of decrease the barriers to entering the sport in the first place. I think that if rowing were not such an expensive sport, then we could get more children in who look like us, or more young adults in who look like us, and subsequently their parents and their grandparents and a whole community of people who look like us, right? Like that's a very fundamental thing we could do. And I think we should also culture is our own play. If you want to recruit the top talent from anywhere across the country, from people who look like us, and you want those people to be able to speak up and speak their minds, to be genuine and speak truth to power, I think that people have to know that there are people supporting them, and they have to know that, their culture is as pervasive in this sport as other people's cultures are as well. I think those are probably just two things we should focus on. So one, economics, and two, culture.
Thank you. Just to tie it back to the Other America speech, that was one of the things that Dr. King had actually focused on was, creating economic initiatives that would decrease the poverty gap. So I think that's absolutely right on point. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. Everyone go back and read that speech because it stands up 50 something years later, and just the eloquence and the insightfulness and the sort of understanding of what was going on then and what unfortunately continues to go on today. It was really, really powerful for me and really inspiring as I was getting ready for this today. We've got about 10 or 15 minutes left. I'd ask that anyone who's listening in on the webinar, if you're still out there, if you've got questions, please put them in the Q&A. And we've got one, and I throw it out to whoever wants to take it. What would you suggest the right course of action would be when your teammates or a coach supports a group or individual that is known to be against you or things that Black people stand for?
Well, it depends on are you at a school where you feel, we talk about having to deal with things from an HR side at the lowest possible level. Is that a safe place? Is that school, is your coach the problem? Is your coach the racist? Is that booster the racist? So knowing where you can go, where you're going to be heard, you may have to go outside of that school. So maybe it's contacting one of us and going, hey, how can you help me navigate this? So, it just depends.
Craig, what do you think?
If you're in New Jersey and that happens to you, transfer and come row for me. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's so hard. It's so hard because, Patrick's point is right? Like we need to be, and Brannon and Aquil brought it up too. Like we need to be in a position where we can support each other. But the hard facts are this, right? I'm in New Jersey. Patrick is in DC. Brannon's in Philadelphia. Aquil is in the Northeast, up there in the boonies somewhere. So what I'm trying to say is that we can't cover the entire country. Like we literally can't. So the harsh reality is that there's a potential that there's going to be a kid that wakes up in a town and, you know, a rowing town that's somewhere in America that we can't physically get to. And they're going to be put in that situation where they have a team, where they have no support. And that's one of the things that we're talking about with the Black Coaches and Rowers Association. Like how can we put ourselves in a position so that we can be an umbrella for all of those children or athletes, wherever they are. So that's something that we're working on and we're actively discussing. I don't have an answer right now because I don't know what it's going to look like, but we'll figure it out, you know?
I mean, if anything we've learned from this last 9 months of COVID is the power of having these type of platforms. So right now, like I know I'm seeing kids that I know, college and high school kids that are on this group who are being empowered by just seeing these faces who over these last couple of years have had real situations. And so we need to create more platforms. I mean, not create more, continue doing this. You know, we don't, being places where you can come, you can ask, you can email there. Back in the day before, like, you know, computers, oh my God, I'm so old. You know, you didn't know that there was another Black kid. You know, I didn't know there was another Black kid who played clarinet and was in a clarinet major. So I thought I was the only one until I saw that the principal clarinet of New York Phil was an African-American man. And it would have been good for me to know that as a 6th grader. We don't know, like, I didn't know, you know, and Brannon, I'm sorry, I keep not picking on you, but I didn't know about Brannon. And it drives me crazy when I think about all those, I know these girls, there's one who's on right now. When she was dealing with the stuff, it would have been great for me to go, hey, let's call Brannon. And so as we're creating these networks, there's the power in us knowing that we're out here, knowing that we can come to each other, but also creating those allies for those people to go, hey, let me introduce you to someone who may help you listen to it from another direction. But there's power in us knowing that we're all together. My last analogy is truth when Willie Dean Johnson told me this. She said, Patrick, when they freed the slaves, son, my grandmother was my mom. She raised me. She said, son, when they freed the slaves, do you know, it was years before they all knew that they were free because they kept those slaves from talking to each other on the different plantations. So I carried that. I thought, same thing. If we communicate and we know we're out there, people who are working against whatever, you know, if it's being gay, whatever, if I know that, hey, it's not going to be okay because they're not going to take it because I have other people who are going to stand up, then it's not going to happen anymore. So if we continue to have awareness that we're not just that one person there that we can call, that we can count on different people, then the oppressors will stop oppressing because they aren't going to get away with it. It won't be all 80 of them and that one little kid who's in the boathouse. So we're like, no, it's not them. We're going to come to your bat. And I think some people have been seeing that. Some people are not happy about that. And I will speak up on that. Good. Because you don't need to be happy about it because you've been wrong for years in the rowing community, some of you, and you need to be aware that we're here and we're watching and we're going to look out and we're going to, we got lawyers too, we got friends too, we got politicians too. So, let's, bring it. Hey, I'm speaking truth because that's what I've heard many times. Oh, you'll get sued. All right, you can get sued too. So if you're listening, I'm talking to you.
The answer to the question is call Patrick.
I just want to say, Patrick, I'm right up there with you with the, in the age category. And I precede I was, when I was little, there was no internet. Hell, when I was a 20-year-old, there was no internet. So that's how old I am. And I think, it can be exhausting to be the only one. And it's exhausting and you get beat down and you forget that there are others like you because they're everywhere else. And I go back to when I was a corporate lawyer and I was always the only one. I was the only one in the corner and it was like, Courtney, can you get the coffee? And I would, take my big Harvard law diploma and be like, do you see this? But that was exhausting to have to constantly beat people over the head with my diploma. And I think one thing, we've got some questions about what people can do to obtain more rowing opportunities and how they can be of help. we have social media now. We have ways to communicate. It doesn't matter where we are, what time it is, any of that, because now we are all connected for good or for bad. And I urge people to reach out. I mean, one thing that I have always loved about rowing is that as long as you love the sport, a lot of people accepted you. And they might not look like you, and they might not, have the same background as you, but what bound us all together was love of the sport. And that rowing is where I have felt most comfortable, even when not everyone was like me. So I say reach out to people, talk to people, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Facebook, Google us, stalk us if you need to. We're easy to find. And reach out and ask for help. It's a hard thing to do. The worst thing that can happen is someone doesn't answer you. So then ask the next person. So that's just a little piece of advice from me. Take it for what it's worth. I think we've got a time for about 1 or 2 more questions. I've got one. If you could send a message to the rowing referee corps, what might it be? Anyone?
Do I want to get in trouble right now? No. No, I'm kidding. Not really. Well, I mean, it goes to comment on a previous thing. Brannon brought up a point about visibility. I just want to say really quickly that before George Floyd had to get murdered for me to know about Brannon and Patrick. I'd seen Aquil on TV. When I graduated from high school, I knew who he was, and that he's part of the reason why I wanted to row. So Aquil doesn't count because, I saw him on television, and I was like, I like rowing, and I want to do that too. So thanks, Aquil. But I parked, I drove our trailer to that Temple parking lot for years, and I didn't know who Brannon was. I just assumed that those boats that were out there were just an extension of St. Joe's or someone else. And I think what's in terms of visibility, it makes it really difficult to feel that you have a connection if you don't know people exist. And I think when we say we're alone, it's a lie. It's a lie. There are tons, not tons, but there are a lot of people of color who are out there in America, dispersed, and even around the world, who love the sport just as much as anyone else. But if we don't know we exist, and that lie continues to perpetuate itself, then that's where that feeling of alone can come from. Hell, there could be a kid in PA, if he doesn't know, he'll feel alone. If there's a kid in Florida who doesn't know, she's going to feel alone. So we have to do everything we can to undo that as much as possible. But about the referee corps, I would just say, I've had both ways. I've had referees who've been great with the kids, and I've had referees who I would rather not see again. So I think the easiest way to fix that problem is just everybody does the same training, and they won't have that problem.
Yeah, I would say,
which I'm sure they're going to fix.
Yeah, I was going to say, just double down on what Craig said. Referees have to join the conversation and understand what their role is and how they can be a positive force in not only how they talk to the athletes, but in how they interact with the athletes all around. And understand what role they play in making this a better sport and not just calling the races.
Yeah, and talking to each other about hey, I saw this, and helping to educate and helping people be aware. I say as a Black coach, I've had some of the same situations where I'm like, oh, I don't think this was fair. And it wasn't treated the same way as when, the white coach from the private school went up to that same referee. And so the deal is, I think from the referee corps, you have to look at what things that happen and go, hey, let's look at that after the fact and be sure that we're getting together and talking about it and addressing issues that we see, so people can either go, oh, I need to look at that. They may not even be aware that they're, oh yeah, this is a big Black man walking up to me. Did you did you feel intimidated by him? Because that's on you, not him. So did you treat him the same way as, that other coach? And going, wow, let's look at that and let's grow from that. So I think accountability from inside and going, hey, let's help each other be better and grow. And I think the referees, you can make or break an experience for a coach or for an athlete just by how you're making them feel. So when you see that stuff, be sure that you're sending them some love, because, we all need it, not just the kids
Thank you. All right, last question. Then I will let you all go out for your evenings. As the parent of a high school rower being contacted by college recruiters, what do we need to know about the environment in general? And what questions should we be asking about diversity or lack thereof?
Talk to other parents who have kids there, who are in the program. They're going to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Seek out the parents of the kids who quit that team. Do your research. Find out why they quit.
Yeah, I would talk to the coaches straight up about any issues and concerns that I had, and gauge how comfortable or uncomfortable they are to talk about it, because you're giving them one of your greatest treasures to mold,
And I also think, I've had some of my best moments and worst moments in the sport. I think, I got recruited by Wisconsin and Texas, and you need to understand the culture. And you're not going to get that in a recruiting visit too. I think you need to understand your recruiting visit, you only get 5 of them, and you're there for a weekend. So you're not getting a week of undivided time. So you do have to accelerate the process a little bit and make sure that you are trying to be as honest as possible. It's like a marriage. You know what I mean? The more frank you are, the clearer you are, the better shot you are going to have in making an educated decision.
Yeah, and then sort of to echo what everyone else said, I would treat it the same way I do a job. Like when I'm thinking about, what company I'd like to work for, the first thing I do is reach out to people who look like me in that company. And I'm curious about how they've been treated over time, and like, that's something that I typically do. And I encourage parents to do that who are looking to have their students be recruited at particular schools. Find out if there are Black athletes on those teams and reach out to those athletes and have conversations.
Patrick?
Oh, perfect. Yeah, accountability. If people know you're asking, you're checking, they're going to change their ways. Or, ask and go, hey, could you put me in touch with some folks here? Well, why are you asking? Because I want to know, do you have any rowers of color? Like for me, I want to know, do you have any out gay rowers? Because I want to know if I'm sending one of my high school kids there who's out. And do you have any veteran rowers? I want to know if I'm sending one of my veterans who has PTSD there. It's all the same, and that you're asking, they know that you're thinking about it. And if they're uncomfortable, like Aquil said, if they're uncomfortable, they don't even have an answer, then I'm going to be like, they're not thinking about this, or they're so uncomfortable talking to me about this, then what are they doing when those kids have these issues?
And also understanding too, I think we focus a lot on the youth. We have a large master's program, and they help our youth program quite a bit. Mentorship is important. If you don't have the answers, you can find them. And I think rowing we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot by we're always focused on the youth, side. The master's side is really important. Our learner rows in West Philadelphia and in these Black areas, our staff are collegiate rowers that get mentored by Black rowers that came to the sport late, and they're teaching them life skills, and they're having conversations, and they're helping them navigate things that they've experienced, because they are in a corporate attorney, Courtney, or they are a tax attorney, or one of them's a doctor. So you know what I mean? I think the sport is not operating at its full potential. There's a synergy and this really lovely sort of organic thing that starts to happen whenever you start leveling the playing field and letting everyone meet each other at the same spot, right? Rowing is the only sport where you get in a boat, you face the same direction, and you shove off the dock, right? We need to start bringing that practice and that idea into our decision making, into how we're building this. You cannot recruit the diversity that you do not have. You know what I mean? And you're right, we're going into these white spaces. We need to start really being honest about that.
The last thing I'd say is look at the, if you can, look at the school. I'm like taking bits and pieces of what everyone says, but like there are more stakeholders to a program than just a coach, right? Or any program, regardless of whether it's a college, university, where you're talking about club, D3, D2, D1, para, youth, gay, whatever. You look at the leadership of the organization, and one of the dead giveaways for what made me choose William and Mary, because I walked on in college, is that there were Black women, there were who were in positions of power in the university. There were gay men, there were Black men, there were Asian women who were in positions of power in the university. When I saw that, I was like, okay, if they're gonna let you, like, people who look like me be a dean or be making decisions and all this other stuff, then this is a safe space for me. And I mean, that means a lot. Like, visibility is not a joke. It's not a joke.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. I want to, on behalf of the head of the Charles and the Gold Cup, I want to thank all of the panelists for joining us tonight and sharing and being so honest and so forthcoming and just so raw and real with what you had to say. We really, truly appreciate it. This has been so much fun for me personally. Thank you for letting me be a part of it. And for the participants, I hope you had a good night. I hope you had as much fun and learned as much as I did. And I'm hopeful that this is something that we continue to do as a community, as a grant review committee, as grant recipients, and as rowers. So thank you all for your time. Please stay safe and healthy in the next few days. We've got a big Wednesday coming up. So I wish everyone the best, and thank you so much for participating tonight.